So next year marks the 250th anniversary since the founding of this thing called the United States. I say this thing called the United States because originally we were a confederation of states, which evolved somewhat into a federal republic, but we've never really been a nation. And now everybody's coming out of the woodwork in the media sphere. What type of legacy is America going to have? Are we divided? Well, yes, we've always been divided because that's the way the founders designed it. Where have you people been? That is the way the founders designed it, and for good reason. They didn't want an overbearing central government. They didn't want to live under the thumb of a monarchy. But here you go. You got people coming out and saying, wait a minute, we can't celebrate this because America had slavery. So freaking what? So freaking what? You still have slavery today in the Sudan. What are you going to do about it? I don't know, nothing. The way we should be looking at this thing called the United States is that that's who we were then. This is who we are now. Yes, we had slavery. But why did we have slavery? Because a lot of that was imposed by the British monarch. So there's an article at the Economic Times I want to share with you. I have a couple quotes here from George Mason, John Locke, and it was John Locke and Montesquieu who inspired Thomas Jefferson, who, by the way, even though he owned slaves, as a lawyer back in 1769, he freed about, or tried to free about 7 enslaved people. But he was shot down, again because of the British Crown. And that phrase, all men are created equal, wasn't about racial equality. It was about political equality. In fact, I'm going to share an excerpt here from an interview they did over at Stanford's site, the Stanford University. I think it's the name of the site. But they spoke with Jack Rakove, who's a Stanford historian, who talks about this. So we'll get into that in just a moment. Now, for the sake of time, and welcome back to the channel, Culture Confederacy here. It's Monday, so happy Monday, everybody. Got to get ready for work soon, so I'm going to try to do this as quickly as I can. A lot to get to, so let's just get to it. If you're new, no fancy graphics, epic soundtracks, pretty boy camera angles. It's just you, me, my smartphone. We talk about the news of the day, try to preserve great art, music, history, and culture. Maybe a grab bag, if you will. You might get a tinge of politics, but that's what we do on the channel. So thank you again for watching and subscribing. I really love doing this channel. I really do. Oh, and it's so much fun to ruffle people's feathers and make them think. That's what we're supposed to do as YouTubers. That's our job as YouTubers. So thank you again for watching and subscribing and joining me in this journey, having fun as we plug along here in this thing called the Culture Confederacy. So let's get to this article again over at the Economic Times. 250 years after America went to war for independence, divided nation battles over its legacy. Because, we had slavery. We had Jim Crow. But we also had discrimination against the Irish, the Italians, some Germans during World War II. In fact, the Irish, I've said this before, not only the Japanese, but also you had the Italians and the Germans who were interned during World War II in the United States. In the United States, we had over 700 German prisoner of war camps, if you want to call them that. So let's get to the, pardon me, let me give you the synopsis here. As the 250th anniversary of the American Revolution begins, the nation grapples with its complex history. As though the United States is the only place that has ever had a complex history. I don't know, ancient Rome, Egypt, Persia, Europe as a whole. The initial conflict at Lexington and Concord, so this focuses on these reenactments they did a few weeks back. These battles at Lexington and Concord. Those shrouded in mystery ignited a fight for self-governance. While colonists initially sought reconciliation with Britain, the events propelled them toward independence, sparking debates about equality and the nation's future that continue to this day. No, the argument was, where is our political footing? Where's our representation as free and independent colonies or free and independent states. That was the argument back in 1775, 1776. So I'm going to read you, as I said, just a few portions of the article here for the sake of time. What exactly happened at Lexington and Concord? Reenactors may with confidence tell us that hundreds of British troops marched from Boston in the early morning of April 19, 1775 and gathered about 22.5 kilometers northwest on Lexington's town green. First-hand witnesses remembered some British officers yelling, "Thrown down your arms, ye villains, ye rebels," and that amid the chaos a shot was heard followed by scattered fire from the British. The battle turned so fierce that the area reeked of burning powder. Yeah, I'm pretty sure this was a very volatile time. By day's end, the fighting had continued around 11 kilometers west to Concord, and some 250 British and 95 colonists were killed or wounded. But no one has learned who fired first or why, and the revolution itself was initially less a revolution than a demand for better terms. So it's a very volatile time. And these colonists are hated by the British. I mean, the British, they despise these colonists. Woody Holden, a professor of early American history at the University of South Carolina, says most scholars agree the rebels of April 1775 weren't looking to leave the empire. Oh, I think they were. I think they had it with King George. But to repair the relationship with King George III and go back to the days preceding the Stamp Act, the Tea Act, and other disputes of the previous decade. Stacy Schiff, a Pulitzer Prize-winning historian whose books include biographies of Benjamin Franklin and Samuel Adams, said Lexington and Concord, quote, galvanized opinion precisely as the Massachusetts men hoped it would, though still it would be a long road to a vote for independence, which Adams felt should have been declared on the 20th of April, 1775. But at the time, Schiff added, it did not seem possible that a mother country and her colony had actually come to blows. Well, I think people could see the writing on the wall. They knew what side the butter was on. Did I say that right? So it goes on to say here, a fight for the ages, the rebels had already believed their cause greater than a disagreement between subjects and rulers. Well before the turning points of 1776, before the Declaration of Independence, or Thomas Paine's boast, quote, we have it in our power to begin the world over again, they cast themselves in a drama for the ages. They talk about the Suffolk Resolves of 1774 here. The revolution was an ongoing story of surprise and improvisation. Military historian Rick Atkinson, whose Fate of the Day, shameless plug here for his book, is the second of a planned trilogy on the war called Lexington and Concord, a clear win for the home team, if only because the British hadn't expected such impassioned resistance from the colony's militia. Militia, there you go. Militia! We got a militia, not a militia, we got a militia. Once shots were fired in Lexington, Samuel Adams and Joseph Warren did all in their power to collect statements from witnesses and to circulate them quickly. It was essential that the colonies and the world understood who had fired first. But Americans have never stopped debating the balance of powers, the rulers of enfranchisement, or how widely to apply the exhortation, all men are created equal. Well, this had nothing to do with racial equality. This was all about political footing. Where's the representation for us as colonies? Tax without representation? Let me find that quote here. I think it was Patrick Henry who said it. When you're reading this stuff, I mean, you can kind of get lost sometimes. There's just so much to go through. Let me see if I can find that quote. Well, they talk about, somebody in here talks about unfettered shackles and chains. Talking about slavery. No, they're talking about slavery under the king. That's what they're talking about. Slavery under the king. Remember, these were subjects of the crown. You didn't go against the king back in the day. That's just something you didn't do. So when all was said and done, here's what George Mason had to say about the Constitution. Remember the ratification of the Constitution, I believe, in 1787? pardon me, there is no declaration of rights in the laws of the general government being paramount to the laws and constitution of the several states. The declaration of rights in the separate states are no security, nor are the people secured even in the enjoyment of the benefit of the common law. So he's saying, wait a minute, you're going to pass this constitution, give all this power to the central authority. We're going to have a monarchy again. And where are the Bill of Rights for the citizens of these colonies? Or these colonies wanting to become states? Where's our representation? Where's our political footing? So getting back to the article here, a country still in progress. Neither side imagined a war lasting 8 years or had confidence in what kind of country would be born out of it. The founders united in their quest for self-government, but differed on how actually to govern and whether self-government could even last. They called this thing an experiment. Seriously, they called it an experiment. In the words of Benjamin Franklin, a republic if you can keep it. Americans have never stopped debating the balance of powers, the rules of enfranchisement. The rules of enfranchisement. We have rulers over you. That was the British Crown. Or how widely to apply the exhortation, all men are created equal. Again, it's all about political equality. Quote, I don't think the founders had any sense of a country that someday would have 330 million people. A country is an unfinished project and likely always will be, Atkins said. So to back this up here, that it wasn't about racial equality, all men are created equal. Let's go to the Stanford report, and this was an interview they did with Jack Rako, Stanford historian. And he talks about this. Talks about the role of slavery during the colonial period, or the timeline of slavery from the founding to 1860, 1865. And he says this, when Jefferson wrote, all men are created equal, in the preamble to the Declaration, he was not talking about individual equality. What he really meant was that the American colonists, as a people, had the same rights of self-government as other peoples, and hence could declare independence, create new governments, and assume their separate and equal station among other nations. That's in quotes. And that phrase, separate and equal station, is the exact same language you see in South Carolina's secession document. And I'll bring this up again. It was Christopher Gadsden, a brigadier general in the Continental Army, who created the Gadsden flag. The Don't Tread on Me flag. So he's from South Carolina, and South Carolina was this brigadier general during the American Revolution. And it was South Carolina that seceded in 1860. I think there's a connection there. But that really wasn't our first secession. Our first secession happened in 1776. But after the Revolution seceded, Americans began reading that famous phrase another way. It now became a statement of individual equality that everyone and every member of a deprived group could claim for him or herself. Well, of course, because as time progresses, as nations grow, they're going to naturally have to include more representation because you have more people coming in. You're always fixing these laws, tweaking things. You have different things happening in these different communities. So, of course, over time, things are going to evolve. But what did John Locke have to say about government? Well, in his second treatise on government, this is in chapter 4, talking about slavery. But slavery had a double meaning. It wasn't just, the institution of quote-unquote slavery. It was also talking about being a slave under a tyrannical government. He said this, the liberty of man in society is to be under no other legislative power but that established by the consent in the commonwealth, nor under the dominion of any will or restraint of any law, but what that legislative shall enact, according to the trust put in it. Freedom then is not what Sir Robert Filmer tells us. They have a listing here for observation. They list some type of observation or something. A55, I think this is part of his spiel here. A liberty for everyone to do what he lists, to live as he pleases, and not to be tied by any laws. But freedom of men under government is to have a standing rule to live by, common to everyone of that society, and made by the legislative power erected in it. John Locke. So yes, America is divided, and that's a good thing, because we have different regions of this thing called the United States, with different political beliefs, some cases different religious beliefs. We have different religious sects in the United States. Not sex, sects, S-E-C-T-S. So because of that, different traditions and cultures, America is naturally going to be divided. And we shouldn't be dwelling on what happened in 1775 or 1776. We need to say that was then and this is now. So I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, you know what to do. You can follow me at Instagram, #JasonComposes. Because I write music in my spare time, go to X, Culture Confederacy, Culture Confed 1 on X. Now you can find me at Substack. This is the Culture Confederacy saying peace out. Stay safe, everybody. God bless this thing called the United States. I'll catch you next time. And y'all have a great Monday. Take care.